Good morning. Hope that your Wednesday is off to a good start. Mine is so far in the outdoor office with second cup of coffee. And of course, this is another mug made by my favorite potter. So as with last week, I'm going to open up the Gospel of Luke again this morning, looking at the lectionary gospel passage for this upcoming Sunday, which will be August 3rd. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 3, 13 to 21. Luke chapter 12, 13 to 21. And someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he, the he being Jesus, said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops? And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." That's the lectionary gospel reading for this upcoming Sunday. And if you're not familiar, there is with the lectionary, it's called the Revised Common Lectionary. It was put together in the late 1980s by a consortium or in a gathering of biblical scholars and preachers from multiple denominations, and it gives you, it provides 4 readings for each week: Gospel, Epistle, Old Testament, and then one from the Psalms. And normally the gospel readings go on a pattern. So one year most of the gospel readings come from Matthew, the next year most come from Mark, and then the third year most of them come from the Gospel of Luke, and then readings from John are interspersed throughout. So in this particular year, you see most of the gospel readings come from the Gospel of Luke. And so here we have it, Luke from chapter 12, and suffice it to say, leave it to Luke to make us squirm a little bit. Luke is really good at making us squirm. He is reading Luke sometimes can be inconvenient. So we read the text here, and I've already read the text, but just to give you broader context, if you go back to the beginning of the chapter, we are told that Jesus is addressing a very large crowd. There are thousands that have gathered. There are so many that have gathered, in fact, that some folks are even being trampled. And in the midst of all of this, one young man is able to have his voice heard over the crowd. And a teacher, he says, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So I guess that means that their father has recently died, and this guy doesn't think that his brother is dealing with him fairly. Okay, teacher, tell my sorry no good brother to do right. And Jesus' response, "Well, who made me judge over you?" And then, as so often, he goes on to tell a parable. This is Jesus' normal way of teaching. He teaches in parables. Frequently, he answers questions in parables. Someone asks him a question, and instead of giving a direct, straightforward answer, Jesus tells a story. There was a rich man, and we are told that his lands produced plentifully. There is no hint here that this guy acquired his possessions by fraud or deceit or theft or anything like that. We're not told anything at all to hint that his possessions were ill-gotten. No, we're just told that his land produced plentifully. His land produced plentifully. So much so that his barns couldn't even hold it all. It produced so plentifully that his barns couldn't hold it all. And he decides this: I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns and store away all of this stuff, and then I can relax. In fact, he says, I will say to my soul, soul, we have plenty for many years. You may now relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And so he tears down his barns, builds bigger barns, and fills these bigger barns, and he has it all. He has it made. And then God says to him, you fool. This very night your soul is required of you. This very night your life is required of you. And now that your life is required of you, at the end of the day, whose will your possessions be? Whose will they be? And then Jesus says, so it is with everyone who lays up treasures for himself and not with God. At first blush, this is hard for us to hear, because all of us in our country, we try to save stuff away. It's prudent. We have pension plans and retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, etc., all different ways of storing stuff aside for later. So what is Jesus trying to say? It says that we must lay up treasures with God. We must lay up treasures with God. And that this rich man had been laying up treasures for himself. So what are we to do? Well, I think context is key. If you go beyond this, if you go beyond where the passage cuts off at verse 21, context tells us a lot. Read the next several verses. And he said to his disciples, notice this, that in talking to the person who asked the question, he's addressing a large crowd. There are thousands of people there. But after answering the question in the parable, he says to his disciples, so he's got his disciples there right by him, and so he answers this man's question, and then he turns to his disciples, and he explains things. And he said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you'll eat, nor about your body, what you'll put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to a span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive today and alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things be added to you. And so Jesus gives us the quote from Paul Harvey the rest of the story. The failing of the rich man was that he was worried most about his stuff. He was worried most about his stuff. And Jesus goes on to explain, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added to you. I can't help but remember the old song, seek ye first the kingdom of God. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything else will be added to you. So there's nothing wrong with the man storing away grain, but in tearing down his barns and building bigger barns so he could store all of this grain, that revealed a lack of faith. A lack of faith, which is his great failing. That revealed a lack of faith. As I was reading this a couple of minutes ago, I could not help but think about an Old Testament example. In their wilderness wanderings, God provided manna for them. You remember that? I assume if you're familiar with the Exodus story, God provided manna. Every day there's this manna that fell from heaven. It actually didn't literally fall, but this manna, this white stuff that they found on the ground, and they gathered it up and they ate it that day. And God told them that they were only supposed to gather it on 6 days. Only supposed to gather it for 6 days. On the 6th day, they were going to gather everything they needed, but not gather on the 7th day. A way of teaching them faith. The 7th day is the Sabbath. You're not going to gather on the Sabbath. You want to trust that what you gather on the 6th day is going to be enough for 2. I think it's the same principle. The man's failings wasn't that he had barns to begin with, or full barns, or that his crops had been plentiful, but rather in tearing down his barns and building bigger ones that were totally full, he revealed a lack of faith. And that is what it means to store up treasures with God. To be rich toward God is simply to have faith that he'll provide. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.